Yeah, most welcome. This is the second Stockholm Internet Forum for Freedom and Development. And as said, I think that since we had the first one, and the number one conclusion of the first one, that was held a year ago, was the necessity of having another one, and now we're having another one. Developments since then have been interesting. We've got a far broader support for the net freedom agenda. Primarily the resolution at the UN Human Rights Council that was mentioned extensively in the debate down there, which carries the issue significantly forward. And I think the debate here is going to be on how to carry that forward in different ways. There are also the issues of internet governance that's been in the ITU conference that is also moving forward. But I think it's been a year in which we've got far greater support for the issues of net freedom, where I think there's an increased recognition of the linkage between the net freedom and the global development issues, and where I think that an increasing number of governments are taking note of the positions that we are taking. I think that's just a starting point, and then I can answer the questions that might be there.
Extremist site Kafkas Center operates from Sweden.
No.
Well, it stands so. It says so on the net.
Yeah, to our knowledge, no longer.
It doesn't operate.
It's difficult to know, but to our knowledge, no longer.
But yes or no? Does it operate from Sweden or does it not?
To our knowledge, no longer. That's
okay.
what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So James Ball, The Guardian. Not far from here, you have one of the co-founders of Pirate Bay on trial for hacking offences, and he's also served a year for indirect copyright offences. His family complain about his extradition from Cambodia, from where there's no extradition treaty, for solitary confinement, and say he's been denied access not just to things like the internet, but even a pocket calculator. Do you think...
A pocket calculator?
Yes. He's not even been allowed a calculator during his detention. Do you think there is a gap between the values and the ideals espoused sort of by yourself and by Sweden here, and between the practicalities? And do you think that treatment and that extradition may raise fears in other more high-profile cases?
No, I don't think so. I don't know the sort of particularities of the sort of how things are in Cambodia. So I have obviously no views on that. But no, I don't think there is. But as said, I mean, there are, which wasn't touched upon here, there are IPR issues which are still relevant. I mean, there are laws that must be respected in the IPR field. There are issues concerning hacking, where hacking is creating havoc and damage, which must be dealt with, as there are other issues that must be dealt with. If you go to the resolution of the UN Human Rights Council, it's very clear in saying there should be the same protection of human rights online as we have offline. In that sense, I mean, that's also a way of saying that the same laws should apply. In society offline, there are laws that apply. There are certain things that you are not allowed to do. The same laws de facto applies online, and there must be the same due process. No, I don't see that. That I don't know the peculiarities of that particular case, and even if I knew, I would probably be unable to comment upon them because independence of the judiciary.
Björn Evenfeldt, Swedish News Agency, TT. Do you think Sweden has some kind of special responsibility when we took the initiative for this declaration? And maybe you didn't see it, but there was a lot of tweets about the FRA, and I would like to add one prosecutor dragging the .se, one of the organizers for this event, to court to try to stop Pirate Bay. Is there a problem for you to address these questions?
No, I mean IPR issues are separate. I mean laws apply. You have IPR issues in the print media, in the television, in radio, and you have the same IPR issues here. I mean, it's slightly more complicated because of the complexities of technology, but I mean the same principles of IPR do apply and must apply. Then I said surveillance. FRA is not surveillance, by the way, it's intelligence. But we do have surveillance law in this country. Absolutely, I have no problem with that. That, as said, doesn't infringe upon freedom of speech or freedom of information in any sort of way whatsoever.
Then another question. There was not much talk about the big companies. They were talking about. Do you see that as a problem? There are some giants in this area, and all of them are American. Is that a threat to the freedom on the internet, do you think?
I wouldn't say that, because I think that, I mean, it's true. I mean, you have a couple of giants at the moment. Go back 10 years in time, say. Whom of those were around? Was Facebook around 10 years ago? No. Was Twitter around 10 years ago? No. Who's going to be around 10 years from now? I don't know. I'd like to make the distinction between, so the governments operate by law, so the governments are going to be there. But I think we are operating in a space of technological development where the winners today might be the losers of tomorrow. If the younger generations of the world are dissatisfied with Facebook, within a couple of months they're going to be somewhere else. So it's a different kind of thing. And it's also sort of different. I mean, say that they are dissatisfied with the way in which one of these companies treats some of these issues. I mean, they will jump to some other competitor. It is a market-driven place. I'm saying that without saying that there couldn't be concerns, because there could be, but it's fundamentally different for what we said see on the state side.
One last question: is there a problem that there are no European competitors at that level? More European companies competing with the American giants?
Well, yeah, well, yes, you could say that. But we have European Skype, Spotify. I think the fact that a lot of these things started in the US does not necessarily mean that they're always going to be in the US. There might well be Chinese competitors, Swedish competitors, Nigerian competitors in 10 years' time. But that's a question of us being able to develop and foster a climate and a culture of entrepreneurship, and their freedom comes in. So I don't know, but if I were to guess, I would say that 10 years from now the picture is going to be different, and it's going to be less dominated by the US. There are going to be players out there that we don't know about today, and yeah, it's a very, very dynamic place.
Hi. About Sweden, I noticed not only you have this FRL surveillance, also in around Rosenbad recently I noticed there is a hindrance around the government. Yep. So is there a real fear of terrorists or anything insecure? What's the consideration behind that?
Well, after the attacks, the Breivik attacks in Oslo, I think there was some increased security installations, yes. But that's sort of, I think you find less here than you find in most countries around the world, but still there's some. Highly regrettable, but that's the world we live in.
These human rights laws have exceptions for example, public order, mores, and so on. Yeah. And these get used to, in some countries, for example, ban speech that is critical of Islam or of Ataturk or so and so. And they make the point that in Europe they are similar taboos. It might be Holocaust denial, it might be intellectual property, those things. And that there's this, that we're being hypocritical here in the West when we criticize other countries for having their own taboos. In Sweden that might not be so much the case, but it is in other European countries. Is there anything at the European level that we can do to remove this criticism of hypocrisy?
I think it's a fair point that there are restrictions in all countries, and they are somewhat different. I think it's also that it's important that we take a debate also inside Europe, I mean, there are some countries, I think the French and the Austrians, who have this Holocaust denial. You might know more about which countries they are. I find that strange, that we should have legislation on history. I think to establish the truth about history is far better done by the freedom of research and the freedom of debate than by laws. I think there was a new law in Russia coming on what you can say about the Second World War now. I saw that on this RT yesterday, for example. Sorry? Sorry, I don't know. No, but I saw it on this RT or whatever, this Russian thing yesterday. I don't think that is wise. And I think the more restrictions of that sort that we have, although not very many, so that undermines the argument that we might have versus others. That being said, I think we should recognize that cultures are different, and it will be different. But the greater the space for freedom of expression we have, the better for society. Our restrictions in Sweden are extremely few, but we have restrictions, as you know. Well, hate speech primarily.
Are there European policy places? Are there European places where, I mean, is there a discussion at European level? Is there anything that Sweden can do in this location?
I think there is a discussion in the Council of Europe. You have and there's a certain extent of discussion inside the OSCE, but the Council of Europe would be the place. And of course, we have the European Court of Human Rights. So if there are sort of infringement, you can go to the European Court of Human Rights, and exactly how they would judge these particular cases, I don't know. But the instruments are there, yes.
And if I can ask one question about, in the previous session, Jacob Appelbaum made this pointed intervention, which is that there is, his accusation is that there is pervasive surveillance of all communications going between Sweden and outside of Sweden, which includes the Nordics, and that this provides a kind of chilling effect. Can you deny that there is communications is copied and stored in case that it's needed later?
Yeah, I can deny that. Not the case, but we do have. I mean, it's slightly different. Slightly different has to be said. In terms of surveillance, domestic security, that goes for persons to a large extent. If you take about the intelligence, which is things, it more goes against things. But same thing. There's a process that is needed for them to be able to look for something. And that has to go through a legal body with parliamentary oversight.
Are there terms beforehand that are, for example, if you say a certain word or something like that, that these prompt a copying or a...
Works in different ways, but I mean, works in different ways. But essentially, there's a legal process with parliamentary oversight. And it certainly doesn't take in everything. That would be physically impossible.
Final question: how do you differentiate between communications that's internal to Sweden and external to Sweden? How do you differentiate between communications between non-Swedes and Swedes? Is it not difficult to know beforehand who you might be surveilling?
I can't go into very much of it, but just to say that it's rarely persons. Things. Could be weapon systems. Could be technologies of weapons of mass destruction. I mean, technologies for weapons of mass destruction would, of course, be one of the targets that we have. Tracking of illegal trade in those. That's an obvious one. For example, I mean, it's those sorts of things that they are looking for. It's rarely persons.
NTD News, independent Chinese.
And I have to say that it applies also to Sweden to some extent, because one of the problems of being a high-tech nation is that we do have a lot of these technologies, both for weapons of mass destruction, and for ballistic missiles and things like that. So we have a fairly stringent technology control regime. But we've had, not only had, by the way, instances of countries that are illegally trying to get technologies out of Sweden for purposes that are clearly not acceptable. And that's the sort of issues that we are dealing with and needs to deal with. Otherwise, we will not be fulfilling our international obligations.
We wonder if we could have a separate interview with you after the questions.
We'll see if we have the time, but...
One question. Are you prepared to put more pressure on Ecuador to get Julian Assange to Sweden for questioning?
No.
Not in any case?
No. No, because I mean, I'm, as you know, to state the obvious, I'm the foreign minister. I'm not the prosecutor. And we have an independent judiciary, and I can't do anything, and I'm not allowed to do anything in either way.
Hello, my name is Guéric Poncet. I work for the French newspaper Le Point. Internet surveillance isn't about freedom of expression, as you said, but more about privacy. So how important do you think privacy is, and how much can it be reduced for security purposes?
Very good question, and that's why we have... I mean, the thing that worries me now in this particular development is less, although it could be different in different countries. But when it comes to what governments can do, that's in the countries that I'm aware of, heavily regulated by law. But I would say that if you take the combination of IKEA, the local bank, and Google, they would know more about the individual than any government would ever be allowed to be even in the vicinity of. We are entering a new situation where sort of the information on our... Since we live a large part of our life online, or register a large part of our life online, a lot of that is, of course, stored in server parks all around the world and can be, as it said, mined by private companies or others. And that is something that I think need to be debated somewhat more. And that is, of course, and can't be really regulated by law. It's virtually impossible because it operates in so many jurisdictions, these particular. But I mean, everything that you do that is digital is stored somewhere in the world.
Okay. Second question. In politics school, I was told that the goal of terrorists is not to kill, but to frighten the society. Yeah. And in a society where we live, where we are obsessed by security because of the terrorists, don't you think they won a little?
They would have won if we were. I don't think we are.
When we set up DPI, for example.
What?
When we set up deep packet inspection on the internet, only for dozens of...
that's a technology that is used for a lot of other things as well. So that's not necessarily related to that. No, I do think that if you go back to the period immediately after 9/11, yes, there was that particular fear. We saw some societies running in the wrong direction. I think, broadly speaking, our societies have now managed to find a more acceptable balance. There are still the security concerns, and we had a sort of a horrible wake-up call with the Breivik tragedy in Norway, which is of a different nature, which illustrated the fact that we can't be entirely naive. But at the same time, the best defense of open society is the open society itself. But there has to be some on the margins, protections and safeguards. But overall, I do think that the feeling immediately after 9/11 is thank God, essentially gone.
Let's take the last question.
Okay, China is the largest internet nation where the Chinese people are censored for internet. How can Internet Forum help the Chinese people?
By the debate, and I do think the developments in China itself is moving in the direction of sort of opening up somewhat. I'm seeing the effect of Weibo on the public discourse in China. Of course, there are the limitations of it, but I think even that is sort of pressing and changing the borders and the boundaries of the public discourse in China.
And what can Sweden do for the Chinese people?
I think the public debate. I mean, what we did at the Human Rights Council was important, which was, as a matter of fact, at the end of the day, supported by the Chinese government as well. So then it's up to the government of China to live up to that as well.
And what is your hope for the conclusion of this Internet Forum this year?
That remains to be seen. We'll see tomorrow where the debate is, and I think one possible and probably conclusion is to have another meeting in a year's time, because I do think, as we said in there, that there have been a lot of good developments, some disturbing ones, but we are only in the start of this particular issue. I mean, all of these issues, if we're talking about net freedom or net security, be certain, or the other privacy issues of things stored on large server farms around the world, be certain that those issues are going to be far higher up on the global agenda 5 years from now than it is today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.